powers that are beyond you. Have you forgotten who I am? Have you forgotten what I can do?
Many thousands of years ago, before the opening of the Dark Portal, before the War of the Ancients, and the Sundering of the World, before the rise of the Night Elf civilization, trolls ruled the land. At its center stood the Zandalari tribe, one of the first of its kind. The Zandalari built the great city, Zuldazar, atop a grand mountain range. As time passed, several other tribes began to grow, stretching out into the world. The greatest of these tribes were the Drakari, the Amani, and the Gurubashi. On the slopes of the Zandalar Mountains, an ancient creature slept, locked away by the wild gods. The creature appeared as a mound of blackened stone, and the wild gods, worshipped as the Loa in the troll religion, warned the trolls not to disturb the mound. Not all trolls heeded the warning, however, and it was eventually discovered that the mound was actually a being of incredible power. A being that even the Loa feared. Must be a powerful being indeed, the trolls thought. And so they gave blood sacrifices to the slumbering being in an attempt to waken it. The being was the Cathrax general Kithix. The creature awoke, looked upon the trolls, and decided that their annihilation would serve the old gods well. The Cathrax reached out with his mind and found his army waiting, the endless Akir, insect servants of the old gods. So started the immense war between Troll and Akir. The Zandalari commanded the trolls in battle, and the Loa lent their aid. The trolls eventually pushed the Akir back from their homelands, but it became obvious that, if left unchecked, the Akir would rise again, and again. The Zandalari sent the troll tribes to the far corners of Kalimdor to protect the Empire and keep the Akir under control. The jungles in the southeastern corner of the continent, and the deserts in the southwestern, were settled by the Gurubashi tribe. They came upon the fortress of Ankaraj, and discovered that the Akir had corrupted the Titan Forge that once protected the fortress. Great Anubisas obliterated the troll encampments. The Gurubashi split their forces into smaller raiding parties, and fought to keep the Akir and their new weapons under control. It took the Gurubashi many long years to beat the Karaji back, but they were never able to kill the Akir completely. The Drakari and the Amani tribes fought their own battles with the Akir, and it was the Amani who eventually slew Kithix, building their city of Zolomon atop the site where the Cathrax fell. With the general dead, the Akir were cornered into small pockets of the continent. The centuries-long war came to an end, and the trolls were able to begin expanding their civilizations. Soon, 3 new empires emerged. The Zandalari withdrew to their mountain peaks, and the continent was dominated by the Amani, the Drakari, and the Gurubashi empires. In the jungles, the Gurubashi built their capital, Zul'Gurub. In the deserts to the east, near the fortress of Ankaraj, they built the city of Zul'Farrak, owned largely by the Sandfury tribe. Their empire stood strong for many centuries, until another group of trolls rose to power, the Dark Trolls. The Dark Trolls secluded themselves from the other tribes, and over many generations, and the influence of the Well of Eternity, transformed into a new race entirely. They became known as the Night Elves. Through the Well of Eternity, they harnessed the power of arcane magics, and through its transformations, they gained an intelligence and immortality unrivaled by the other mortal races of Azeroth. Their empire spread until it began to contest with the Troll lands. The Trolls fought back, but the Night Elves were unmatched, their magics proving far too powerful. Eventually, Ashara, queen of the Night Elves, treated with the leaders of the Zandalari. The Zandalari still had strong influence amongst the other troll empires, and through them, Ashara convinced the trolls to mine their holdings, and no more. The once mighty empires of the trolls were now dwarfed by the shadow of the Night Elven Empire, and there was little they could do. It would be the start of a hatred for the Night Elves that would stay with the trolls for many thousands of years, and remain strong to this day. As the centuries passed, the Night Elven Empire grew too large, its leaders too proud. Ashara and her highborn became swayed by the Burning Legion, an army of demons bent on the destruction of the universe. Their leader, the fallen titan Sargeras, convinced Ashara to begin opening a portal to allow his armies onto Azeroth. The war that ensued would break the world, and catastrophe would befall the trolls, night elves, and everything else living on Azeroth. Ashara's portal used the magics of the Well of Eternity for power, and when the portal was closed by the armies fighting against the invading demons, the well collapsed in on itself, causing a massive implosion that tore the continent of Kalimdor apart. Known as the Sundering, the event left the peoples of Azeroth struggling to survive. The Gurubashi were no different. The Sundering tore their civilization apart. Zul'Farrak was now on the other side of the Great Sea, Zul'Gurub in chaos, and everything in between lost to the sea. Zul'Gurub fell to poverty and despair, never to fully recover. The last true emperor of the Gurubashi, Chief Varghazul, sought to conquer some of the land lost to his people. It's not known who Varghazul intended to pit the Gurubashi against, but he was stopped by an unlikely foe. The Gurubashi earned the wrath of Neptulon, and the great elemental lord sent both the sea and his powerful kraken crashing against the Gurubashi. The lands west of Zul'Gurub were washed away, the city of Ilalai buried under the ocean, and the remainder of the empire left broken. The power of the Gurubashi was no more. But the Gurubashi trolls that remained would not forget the power they once held. They longed to return to the days of glory, when the Gurubashi dominated most of the southern half of the continent. They turned to the Loa, called on them to lend their aid. One Loa answered the call, on one condition: the Gurubashi bring him blood sacrifices to feed his ceaseless hunger. The Loa proved a powerful being, and soon the Gurubashi was conquering the land once more, feeding their new master with gnolls and murlocs native to the lower half of the eastern continents. They revered the Loa's name, for he would lead them to their salvation. Hakkar, Loa of Blood. Hakkar, the Soul Flayer. Not all the Gurubashi fell under Hakkar's sway. Those that did would begin calling themselves Hakkari, with the greatest, most fanatical priests among them becoming known as the Atalai. The rest watched and waited, saddened by the further degradation of their people. The Atalai worked to create a physical manifestation of Hakkar's spirit, feeding the god more blood, giving him more and more power. The blood god's influence expanded to terrifying heights. The Zandalari, who had survived the Sundering and remained a power among the trolls, heard about the Gurubashi and their conquests, and were pleased. Perhaps this would be the return to power the trolls had been waiting for so long. When they saw the endless hunger of the Gurubashi's Dark Lord, however, the Zandalari knew that they needed to act. They came to the shores of Stranglethorn Vale, and met with those Gurubashi who did not join the Hakkari. The war that ensued was a bloody, vicious one. Eventually, the rebel army stormed Zul'Gurub and took the fight right to the Atalai. The Gurubashi defeated the Atalai and Hakkar himself. The threat of Hakkar, it appeared, was over. The Gurubashi returned to their scattered tribes, and though they would never rise to the power Hakkar had promised them, they would not fall to the Dark God's madness. The surviving Atalai fled to the swamps north of Zul'Gurub. There they began to construct a temple to their great god. The temple of Atal Hakkar took shape amongst the marshes, and within, the Atalai renewed their work. They began the rituals to call Hakkar into the world. The temple and the ceremonies conducted within drew the attention of Ysera, aspect of the green dragonflight. Ysera rushed to put a stop to the Atalai's plans. The aspect slammed her power into the temple. The temple heaved and cracked before sinking beneath the wet marshlands. The Atalai inside fled, and Ysera, worried that the trolls might return to continue their work, posted guards to watch over the temple, led by Ysera's consort, Ironicus. The Atalai were more resistant than the green dragons anticipated, however. They returned to the temple to resume their work, and using the blood of Hakkar, corrupted the green dragons. Ironicus himself, who had likely been slumbering, fighting the nightmare within the Emerald Dream, was corrupted and turned to the nightmare. The Atalai had recovered their temple, neutralized their guards, and were free to continue their work, hidden beneath the Swamp of Sorrows. It soon became apparent to the Atalai that Hakkar's true form couldn't be summoned within the temple. Hakkar was tied to Zul'Gurub, and only within the city could his physical form be fully restored. The Atalai moved their operations to Zul'Gurub, and just in time. Adventurers descended on the sunken temple, seeking to put a stop to the Atalai's plans and free Ironicus. They found the avatar of Hakkar and Ironicus's shade, and fought to quell both threats. The Atalai priests that stayed behind fell to the adventurers, but to the south, at Zul'Gurub's center, their associates were already successful. Within the walls of Zul'Gurub, Hakkar had been reborn. The remnants of the Gurubashi banded together to put a stop to the Blood God, but Hakkar's influence was too strong. The leader of the remaining Hakari, Jindo the Hexer, turned the high priest sent against Hakkar to his side, forcing them to siphon the powers of their own gods to Hakkar, further empowering the god. With the powers of the high priests, Hakkar's avatar was fully realized once more. Hakkar the Soul Flayer had entered Azeroth. The Atalai's persistence had paid off, and soon they would strike at the world that had tried so hard to forget the Gurubashi. The threat of Hakkar drew the attention of the rest of the world. Zandalari moved into position to monitor the threat and called for the aid of both the Alliance and the Horde. Heroes of both factions answered the call and stormed into Zul'Gurub, facing each of the brainwashed high priests, slaying Jindo the Hexer and throwing Hakkar back to the realm from which he came. For the fourth time, it seemed that the threat of Hakkar had been stopped. Hakkar's skeleton was taken by the remaining Atalai priests and returned to the sunken temple. They once again created the avatar of Hakkar. They took from the avatar as much blood as they could and hurried back to the abandoned city of Zul'Gurub. Once again, they began the ritual to summon Hakkar, but they were once again stopped. Jindo the Hexer had been slain in the previous battle for Zul'Gurub, but his spirit had wandered for some time before returning to Azeroth. He abandoned the Hakkari and the Atalai and turned his loyalty back to the trolls as a whole. The Zandalari called a meeting of the troll tribes scattered across Azeroth to discuss the fall of the troll empires. It was time to unite under the Zandalari and restore the trolls to the glory they had once held. Jindo, representing the Gurubashi, knew of one way to return his people to glory. This time, rather than summon Hakkar into the world to lead them, he would break the god and bring Hakkar under his control. With the Zandalari's aid, he took Zul'Gurub from the Atalai, revived the spirits of a few high priests, and began the work of summoning and siphoning Hakkar's power. Once again, heroes struck at Zul'Gurub, warned of the troll's intentions by Vol'jin of the Darkspear tribe, who had claimed himself to the Horde over the trolls. They fought to bring down the high priests once again, and faced Jindo and the shadow of the Soul Flayer. Jindo dragged the heroes into the spirit world, where Hakkar resides. The heroes worked to free Hakkar from Jindo's bonds, and when successful, Hakkar slew Jindo and threw the heroes from his world, but not without a warning.
Be freed, insects. I will deal with you another time.
For one final time, the threat of Hakkar is stopped. The Gurubashi, scattered in smaller, broken tribes throughout Stranglethorn, are a mere shadow of their former strength, the Empire a fading memory of times past. But Hakkar's warning feels prophetic. Hakkar himself still resides in the spirit world, waiting, biding his time for another foolish mortal to bring him into the physical realm. And when they do, Hakkar can finally exact his revenge.